From the Lincoln Journal-Star, this is the Life in the Red podcast with Luke Mullen and Amy Just.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Life in the Red podcast. Luke Mullen and Amy Just with you once again, continuing to progress with this Nebraska football season. Some big matches for Nebraska volleyball going on this week. But of course, big news, 400th sellout, a milestone in the history of Memorial Stadium. And it's happening on a Friday. Go figure, huh?
Yeah, it's the antithesis of Nebraska football. The first ever Friday night game in Memorial Stadium, and it's a benchmark game.
Yeah, one that'll go down in the record books, no doubt. And we'll get into all of the ceremony, the occasion around the game. It's a big test, too, on the field. Really important for Nebraska. They start off this Big Ten campaign. Before we get into that, briefly, your update around Husker sports. The Nebraska soccer team dropped its Big Ten opener 2-0 on the road at Iowa. Another difficult match coming up. They are at Michigan State. And big week for Nebraska volleyball, as I said, swept a ranked Arizona State team, also swept Wichita State. This is the week that people have been looking forward to all season. Stanford comes to town. They go to Louisville. As we record this, they're going to play Stanford later today. So we'll see what shakes out there, and we'll have the full breakdown for you, volleyball podcast here next week. But big matches for the volleyball team.
Yeah, in interviews yesterday, both the talking point was that this is a Final Four week. It's the last week of non-con, and it's two of the toughest tests they've had in an already tough non-conference schedule. As we sit, Nebraska is ranked number 5, Stanford is ranked number 2, and Louisville is ranked number 4. So a tough test for them this week, and they will learn a lot about themselves regardless of what happens.
Yeah, playing a couple opponents that expect to host in the NCAA tournament, expect to be those top contenders. So big test there for Nebraska volleyball. Excited to see how those matches shake out. But let's get into things for football. Coming off this win over Northern Iowa was a big one, 34-3. Never really in doubt for Nebraska, but the way that it transpired was kind of interesting, very different from those first 2 games of the year. Let's talk about the offense first. I mean, efficient. That's what Matt Rule had to say after the game. I don't think you can really discount that. They were 3 for 3 with touchdown drives early on. But just 48 plays for Nebraska compared to that 71 for Northern Iowa. I mean, they had to be efficient with what the setup was there for Northern Iowa.
Yeah, and that first drive for Northern Iowa, a 10-minute drive. Nebraska's defense hasn't seen anything quite like that in a while. And they were converting and converting and converting. And you wondered, would it be like that all game? No, it didn't end up being like that all game, but that's something that Nebraska's defense could see down the road here in Big Ten play, with ground and pound type offenses, really physical type. So it's a good test, I think, for them as we move forward into the rest of the season.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of a wake-up call on that first drive, and kind of the reaction from the players and the coaches this week was, that they were getting there, to that first drive. They were trying to tackle those ball carriers. They were getting to them. They just weren't bringing them down right away. Some of the yards after contact, some of the swarming to the ball, those fine aspects of defensive play. It was 3 points, but Isaac Gifford in the aftermath, he was like, "Oh, I'm not happy. It's not good enough." I mean, that is some classic Gifford right there, the attitude from the Nebraska defense with that one. But I mean, Dylan Raiola on the offensive side of the ball, really steady as he always is. I thought it was interesting. Not a lot of workload for those Nebraska running backs. Again, those snap counts, the number of plays that they ran, that impacted things. But Dante Dowdell, I mean, he pretty much had that first series, really didn't play a whole lot of the game. I mean, he had 14 snaps. I mean, he's a starting running back, played 14 snaps in a win. And a lot of these players, offense, defense, there was just that rotation across the board. Again, the starters were out there in the fourth quarter. This is a team that on a short week was able to rest up a little bit.
Yeah, which is helpful, right? That's what you want ahead of a short week and a game that's going to be very physical. But that's also the byproduct of playing a lot of different guys and then also having fewer than 50 snaps.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these guys on offense too, because there were a lot of them that caught the ball that made an impact there in this Northern Iowa game. Jalen Lloyd took the top off the defense, big catch. Been waiting to see that. He ran several routes that were close, not able to get that catch yet. Well, got that one, I believe it was 59 yards. And then Ja'Cory Barney, Carter Nelson, two freshmen that bring really exciting, athletic potential to this Nebraska offense. Wasn't sure, how soon they were going to be able to contribute. Well, it's week 3 and they're both scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm just knowing Carter's story. I'm just so excited for Carter, right? The talking point is that, he's only played 3 games of 11-man football. I'm not going to say 3 games of real football. 8-man football is real football.
He actually played a couple high school all-star games, too. So 5.
5. But yeah, no, I'm not going to say 8-man football isn't real football. It's real football, and anyone who thinks otherwise is sorely mistaken. But I digress. He's looked the part since we first saw him in practice, right? He doesn't look like he's an undersized guy, but it says a lot about him that they've been able to work him in, because he's one of the few freshmen that didn't enroll early because he wanted to finish out his basketball season, and he wanted to run at state track for the last time. And good, he should have done that. That was the right decision. And I'm just so happy for him that he's been able to make that step and not just be able to play, but to be able to make an impact and actually score and make some catches and, show that he deserved a spot to play on a Power 4 team. As far as Ja'Cory goes, I have been pounding the table on that one since he got here in the spring.
Yeah,
this guy's
spring,
a dude.
yeah.
And I truly believe that he will pop a return for a touchdown this season. I believe it. It's going to happen. He just has that speed, and then he has another gear that kicks in, and he just feels like he's untouchable. He's just so fun to watch, and I'm excited for him that he finally got to score last week, too. Finally. He got in the end zone last week in his 3rd game of his college career. Finally is not the word there.
Yeah, there are some guys that are just special to watch, and Ja'Cory Barney, he's definitely that. We've heard that from the coaches, about everything that he does in practice that we didn't even get to see for several weeks and months. He's very impressive in that regard. And then for Carter Nelson, too, I think when we first saw him practice this fall, it was definitely like, okay, like physically he looks the part, right? The speed of the game, the playbook, all those things that you have for young players. Like, is he going to be able to get that down? And obviously, that takes a couple weeks. You get camp, you get to go through, he's out there a little bit on UTEP. I think this is just part of that upwards trajectory. I think we're going to see more of him this season.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Without question. And I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And then the other interesting thing from a skill position standpoint, Heinrich Haarberg, running back, wide receiver, quarterback in 3 snaps.
The coaches listen to me. They listen to me. This is what I've wanted all along. No, I geeked out on it real hard.
Oh, yeah. We were going crazy in the press box.
As crazy as one professional journalist can be.
We're saying that's Heinrich out there at wide receiver.
And they're like, no. Yeah. I'm like, no, he's out
there. That's Heinrich, yeah.
Again, another guy that I'm really happy for. He is one of the best athletes on the team, one of the best athletes in the athletic department. And as Marcus Satterfield and Matt Rule have said all along, not necessarily speaking specifically to Heinrich, but if you are athletic, we will get you on the field. We will figure it out. And it looks like they're figuring it out. Obviously, I didn't expect them to, empty the playbook in the non-conference, right? But I think as we get more involved into the rest of the season, you're going to see more wrinkles. Ohio State probably there's going to be some fancy things involved in that game plan. But yeah, I feel vindicated saying that Heinrich should be on the field in any capacity possible.
Absolutely. I think too, just as somebody like you love like unique football plays, right? Love seeing like a triple reverse, a double backwards, but whatever different type of wrinkles that these coaches can come up with. And seeing Heinrich line up outside at wide receiver, usually a quarterback does that and it's like, okay, they're just going to stand there. They're going to do a little stutter step, right? They're not really going to run around. He's running that slant. He's catching a ball, taking a hit from a linebacker. He's taking a carry, going right up the middle. It's really just seeing those series of plays. It makes you think like, man, you can have some fun with Heinrich on the field. You can have some fun with some 2 quarterback looks. I want to see a little like backwards pass, look up field. I want to see something like that.
You know what I want to see now? I'm getting greedy. want Jalen Gramstead on the
Oh
field
my
at the same
gosh.
time with him. Just completely throw him off.
Absolutely. Little Jalen football action.
Let's do it. Something dumb.
Yep. But I mean, certainly the way that they used Heinrich was really exciting to see. We'll see if they're able to implement that fully into more parts of the game plan. But wrapping up this Northern Iowa game, like the first two, it was really uneventful. I'll say boring, slightly boring, fourth quarter. But they're happy with that. They win. You grind that opponent down, make sure that they're not there close in the fourth quarter. Matt Rule said, hey, that's right where they want them.
I feel like Nebraska fans have had such a very short memory, right? Like, you're complaining about a boring fourth quarter. You're complaining about a boring fourth quarter.
Well, would you prefer to lose on a last-second field goal?
Right? Like, what are we doing?
That happened a lot last
what
year.
are we doing? Like, don't complain about boring. Never apologize for winning. I don't get it. I mean, I guess Nebraska fans will never be happy, but y'all, come on. Don't complain about boring. For the love of God, don't complain about boring, because we've seen eventful fourth quarters, and those have not gone in Nebraska's way in the past several years. So we forget where we've been.
That's right. I mean, I just think when you do the hard work early, the rest takes care of itself. So definitely, yes, it's not always been, high flying. They've not been in aggressive attack mode always throughout the fourth quarter, but personnel, the strategy, it's all there, and it's all working towards that Nebraska plan. Some recent updates for you from this week of practice. Nebraska now ranked number 22 in the AP Top 25. That's up one spot from last week. It's a ranked matchup. Number 24, Illinois, coming to town. I believe you ranked both those teams again.
I did. Yep. I had Illinois ranked last week. They were the first team out, and I ranked them again this week.
Yep. So a lot of interest in that one.
I know some national people who are going to be here for the game who've texted me today. So I'm looking forward to a more crowded press box this week.
Absolutely. And from a personnel standpoint, an interesting one, offensive lineman Micah Mazuka. He will be available to play, will not start against Illinois after a coach's decision is what held him out of the Northern Iowa game. Matt Rule had spoken about that today. Henry Lutovsky will start at guard again. Good for Nebraska's offensive line depth to have Mazuka back out there. Thought there was really not a drop off at all with Lutovsky in the game there.
No, I didn't notice him at all, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, right. That's an offensive lineman's job well done. And then on the other side of the ball, defensive lineman Riley Van Poppel had a really great freshman season last year. Didn't play against Northern Iowa. That'd be because for now, trending towards a redshirt season. He's appeared in 2 games, so he can have 2 more to go. But again, if he doesn't see the field against Illinois, that would be why. And getting into Illinois, we'll talk about all the scouting report, what to watch about them. But as we mentioned, part of the uniqueness about this game is that it is taking place on a Friday. That's not entirely new. Of course, there's been Black Friday games, but this particular occasion in the middle of the high school football season, September, early home game, Friday night, it's a unique one for Nebraska. Not entirely their choice, obviously, but this is our Husker hot topic for the game. Should Nebraska avoid playing these Friday night games in the future?
Well, Nebraska didn't have much of a choice. If Nebraska had its choice, obviously they would say no. They do not want to do this, but it is an awkward scheduling quirk that Nebraska felt on the wrong side of. Every single Big Ten road game they have this season, with the exception of Iowa, is homecoming for their opponent. And the Big Ten does have some, morals, I guess, and that they will not move homecoming games to Friday. So Nebraska gets the short end of the stick on that one for this week. But it's really unfortunate. And look, it's, Trev, back when he was here, said that, we don't want this. This is not something we are interested in. And the Big Ten this year says, well, too bad.
Somehow that didn't happen to Michigan, though.
Of course not. It's Michigan. But also, who's scheduling Michigan for homecoming?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Who's scheduling Ohio State for homecoming?
Yeah.
Nobody's
doing that. Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, look, I don't think that we should be doing this, but it's a business, and the Big Ten is not beholden to the interests of its universities. It is beholden to the almighty dollar and the interest of the TV networks that have paid a lot of money to air these games. So that's where we're at. I don't think it's changing. I actually think it's going to get worse. But we can still say that it sucks all the same.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I thought we should talk about this because, like you said, I think there are going to be a lot more Friday night games, and not just Friday games. Potentially, they could play on other nights of the week as well.
We saw it last season, right? Nebraska playing on a Thursday. Granted, that was at least to open the
early
season.
On. Yep.
But I think that it's going to get worse. I think that I don't know if the Big Ten will go full action or anything, but it's going to continue to happen, and there's nothing stopping it. The reason why this was stopped in the beginning is there's a landmark court case that banned the NFL from infringing upon high school and college. So that's why you don't see any Saturday night games during the college season. So honestly, if somebody's going to want to change it, they're going to have to sue.
Yeah. Well, and the thing, too, that I think about is this week 0, the week 1, I think that's just going to continue to spiral with before you get those NFL windows. They're going to think, hey, let's just play college football every day of the week till the NFL starts. I mean, that could happen here in the future. I also think, too, it's an 18-team Big Ten. You can get real creative with bye weeks, too. I mean, you can play a game on a Wednesday, depending on how you schedule those bye weeks. Of course, I'm not saying all of this is going to happen, just that these non-Saturday night games, I mean, this is part of what this new era of college football is about. And yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, it just stinks, feel bad, of course, for the local high school football players, those athletes, still should get, a lot of fans, a lot of recognition to their games too, but you're competing for attention, you're competing for eyeballs. There's lots of considerations here in Lincoln too about, police, traffic, support for these games. I mean, there's lots of decisions, right, that go way beyond the football field itself. So really, it is a tough one, a change for people's rhythms. And I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, it is nice, I think, for teams that you get that, maybe marquee primetime game. But this is what we've seen for a lot of the time, the matchups. It is those least desirable games that kind of get bumped to those non-Saturday windows. And that's just what's happened in Nebraska here.
Yeah, and it is, Nebraska has played on Friday nights since I've been here. The Illinois game last year, and then the Rutgers game the year before that. Again, both schools that, if you look at the Big Ten as a whole, are not your marquee brands. They want to be, but they're not. And that's where we are right now. But yeah, Nebraska is just getting the short straw on that one. But hey, if Nebraska continues to get better, then maybe they won't be everyone's homecoming opponent.
That's right. And hey, short week of rest for Illinois, extra day of rest for Purdue. There you go. Silver lining.
Can't wait. Hey, I mean, I'm not complaining about getting to be on my couch all day Saturday to watch every college game that I want.
Doesn't sound too bad. Yeah.
I'm not complaining about that. Not going to be a 4 a.m. AP Valet night for me. Hooray.
That'll be a welcome change.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, I'm trying to look for a silver lining because there aren't very many.
Yeah, it's a unique one for sure. But in terms of the game on the field, of course, 400 sellout, all of that attention, that is going on. But it's an Illinois team that Matt Rule says the Huskers need to be emotionally, physically, and mentally ready for. Those were 3 things he said earlier in the week that teams need to be ready. And that was the case last year. If we turn back the clock a little bit, this was an Illinois game last year that hopes were at an all-time low almost. I mean, they just got steamrolled by Michigan. Matt Rule, it was a risk. I think we said at the time, you take the team in for a physical practice the next day. I mean, if they came out against Illinois and just looked tired, sluggish, got rolled,
lethargic,
people would have said, what is he doing? Does this guy know it's 2023 now? We can't do that with teams. Well, guess what? The exact opposite happened. He knows a thing or two about coaching. Got those guys fired up for a game that Ty Robinson said was their get-right moment of that season, so huge for that season trajectory. So this is an Illinois team that went through that loss. They're going to be excited, but it's a completely different perspective for Nebraska. They're no longer the hunter, is what Rule said. You're the hunted. You're ranked.
Yeah, well, if both teams are ranked, who is hunting who?
Good question. The road team, maybe. I mean, it depends. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah, well, Nebraska is a little over a touchdown favorite. I think last I looked, depending on your sports book, it's 8.5, or 9 that Nebraska's favored by. So I guess Nebraska's technically the hunted in this one. If I need to answer my own question.
And you do, because I wasn't going to answer it.
Yeah, well, thanks.
As your co-host here, leave you out to dry.
Yeah, thanks for that. But yeah, no, last season, not only do I think the Illinois game last season was like a get-right moment for this season, I think that was a turning point for Matt Rule in his, early time here. I think that if they lose that game, last season is a lost season. The season ended up going the way that it did, not making a bowl after, needing just one more game for an entire month. That leaves a sour taste in the mouth. But I think that coming out and winning that game after everything that had happened the week before instilled a lot of confidence that it could be done. They can turn things around. They aren't a lost cause, air quotes for those listening. And so we'll see what happens this week.
Mm-hmm. And so, while Nebraska is playing the same Illinois team that they played last year, there's a lot of differences there. The quarterback, Luke Altmaier, same quarterback as a year ago, but I think really improved. You look at his start to the season, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, completing about 70% of his passes. And this start to the season for Illinois, by the way, beaten Eastern Illinois, Kansas, and Central Michigan. So similar to Nebraska, you got that one opponent in their power conference team, Kansas for Illinois, Colorado for Nebraska.
At the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was ranked at the time. They were playing relatively well. And then Kansas had a ton of turnovers. Stop me if you've heard that before. And Kansas has looked like garbage since, and I can be hypercritical because I went there. So, but yeah, no, they have not looked the same since that loss.
Yeah, and I mean the point being with both these teams is kind of a litmus test. See where you stand against a Big Ten foe, because they had that power conference test, but different ball game here in the Big Ten. A lot to do with the type of athletes that you're going to see on the ground, particular physical. Illinois run game in this one. Caden Fegan, he's that lead back to watch for. They have some other guys that they like to rotate in there, but 6'3", 250. He's fast when he breaks away too. So that combination of powerful and speed, he's going to be a tough one to bring down. Then they have really good wide receivers too. Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, could see their names called in the NFL draft this spring.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Nebraska's secondary does against those guys. Obviously, Tommy Hill, incredible, but it can't be everywhere, right? So who's going to have a field day? Because opposing quarterbacks aren't throwing in Tommy's direction. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But, hope they don't want to be on somebody's highlight tape.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty balanced Illinois offense. And again, I think they've started the year strong. So that'll be one to watch. And then defensively, I think there were some question marks about Illinois coming into the year, just based on the amount of talent that they lost from last year's team. Really, some of their top players departed, but edge rusher Gabe Akis, he's one of those guys. They got Seth Coleman. He's a key linebacker for them. And then really, it's an aggressive secondary overall. Big reason why that they are +8 in the turnover margin, one of the top turnover producing teams in the nation so far this year.
Yeah, that should scare Nebraska.
Yeah.
They haven't. Nebraska has not had turnover issues yet this season. I'm knocking on wood, not because I'm a Nebraska fan, because I don't want to write about turnovers anymore. So they're going to have to be extremely cognizant of ball security this week.
Yeah, that's a worrying point for the Nebraska offense. And by the way, special teams, pretty important in the Big Ten. Illinois' kicker, Ethan McCluskey, nailed a 59-yard field goal last week. And their head coach, Brett Bielema, said he's kicked 60-yarders in practice with yards to spare. Special teams, you never know.
They matter. And not to jump too far ahead, but that is something I'm paying attention to this week.
Yeah, just thought I'd throw it out there. Could be a one-score game. Yeah, they got a kicker who can about kick it from 60. So that's the status for Illinois coming in. As you mentioned, Nebraska is the favorite in this one. Are we predicting them to win?
I am. I have a high-scoring game. Nebraska 35, Illinois 27.
Yeah, I also think it'll be a one-score game. I like the defenses to control this one a little more. I'm going 24-17. Just think that the Nebraska defense is really going to lock up. Illinois will have its moments, but I don't think they're going to be able to drive the ball as consistently as they'd like. And then I think for Nebraska, I get the sense in this one it might be a little bit of a slower start offensively. They have done really good on those opening drives, those scripted drives so far, but could take some maybe time to feel out Illinois as well. I think it's going to be a day for Dante Dowdell.
Yeah, I do too. I think he's going to have multiple touchdowns. I would not be surprised if Nebraska's defense comes up with something. Maybe Ja'Cory Barney breaks one loose on special teams or on offense. He's capable of either. And that's why I think it'll be a little high scoring. Just so there's going to be some explosive plays for scores.
You think some good back and forth action in this one too?
Maybe. My score prediction indicates that, but no. Sometimes the final score never really tells the true story of the game. Yeah,
we'll see how it shakes out on the field. But moving into our final word, one thing we're watching for, I'm really looking at this Nebraska defense. So good last year, so good these first 3 games. Well, it's a new campaign. They've all talked about last year doesn't matter. Put last week behind them. Going out, dominating that first Big Ten foe, showing they're as strong as we believe they are. That's something that they're going to need to do. And again, special teams, how does that show up?
That is what I am paying most attention to this week. What is their long snapping situation look like? Aiden came in for them last week, looked the part. Interesting to note, though, Ed Foley, Nebraska special teams coordinator, said on the radio last night that their kicker, Tristan Alvano, is not 100%. So that explains some things. Will he be better for this week? Will he even kick at all? We didn't see Brian Buschini last week, which is good for Brian. But yeah, kick coverage needs some work. The guys who on defense, like Ty Robinson and everything, they're craving more field goal blocks, need a punt block. Those guys are really aggressive in that way. So yeah, will special teams be a deciding factor in this game one way or the other? That's what I'm paying attention to.
Yeah, they had kicker John Holy took the final extra point there against Northern Iowa as well. So we'll be interested to watch that again. I mean, tight margins in these Big Ten games, a lot of potential for game-changing plays there on special teams. So all 3 phases of the game important here as Nebraska, of course, gets ready for its first conference test. Primetime game, 7 p.m. at Memorial Stadium. A lot of ceremony, a lot of excitement in the air for that 400th consecutive sellout. And of course, we'll have all the coverage for you, all the updates for you at journalstar.com. That'll do it for today's episode of the Life in the Red podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's Life in the Red podcast. Our theme music is composed by Sasha Indy. The stories continue on journalstar.com.